God does everything. In the tradition of the great yogis of India, Maharaj's powers extended far beyond the realm of knowing the minds of others. A profusion of miracles poured out of him, and though he threw dust in our eyes with denials and confusion, we were still allowed to sense this extraordinary process. But as astonishing and dramatic as such phenomena were, they were not in the eyes of the close devotees of Maharajji. This is the sense of the matter. Maharajji himself was the miracle. Just being around him made the commonplace seem miraculous, and conversely, the miraculous came to seem quite ordinary. Yet when devotees gather, it is still the miracle stories that come most readily in their lips. Perhaps this is because such stories are tellable, while the ocean of love, the tenderness, and the healing compassion with which Maharajji, like Christ, worked with true wonders upon us, these are ineffable. What were these miraculous powers about? Perhaps they served the function that the great saints Shirdi Sai Baba, who used miracles in an outrageous fashion, attributed to them. I give them what they want, so they will want what I give. All the miracles concern the physical universe, the world, the material plane, but the essence of the business that we have with such beings as Maharaji is of the spirit, which is far beyond such miracles. Miracles are only the unexpected, and in the spirit there is no expected, so there is no unexpected. This is how Maharaji became known as Neem Karoli Baba, which means the sadhu from Neem Karoli. This was many years ago, perhaps when Maharaji was in his late 20s or early 30s. For several days, no one had given him any food, and hunger drove him to board a train for the nearest city. Vaizan, the conductor, discovered Maharaji seated in the first class coach without a ticket. He pulled the emergency brake, and the train ground to a halt. After some verbal debate, Maharaji was unceremoniously put off the train. The train had stopped near the village of Neem Karoli, where Maharaji had been living. Maharaji sat down under the shade of a tree while the conductor blew his whistle and the engineer opened the throttle. But the train didn't move. For some time the train sat there while every attempt was made to get it to move. Another engine was called in to push it, but all to no avail. A local magistrate with one arm, who knew of Maharaji, suggested to the official that they coax that young sadhu back into the train. Initially the officials were appalled by such superstition, but after many frustrating attempts to move the train, they decided to give it a try. Many passengers and railway officials approached Maharaji, carrying with them food and sweets as offering to him. They requested that he board the train. He agreed on two conditions. The railway official must promise to have a station built for the village of Neem Karoli. At the time, the villagers had to walk many miles to the nearest station, and the railroad must henceforth treat sadhus better. The officials promised to do whatever was in their power, and Maharaji finally reboarded the train. Then they asked Maharaji to start the train. He got very abusive and said, "What is it up to me to start trains?" The engineers started the train. The train travelled a few yards, and then the engineer stopped it and said, "Unless the sadhu orders me, I will not go forward." Maharaji said, "Let him go," and they proceeded. Maharaji said that the official kept their words, and soon afterward a train station was built at Neem, Karoli, and sadhus received more respect. Whenever Maharaji left Allahabad to go to Vrindavan, there was always such a procession, sometimes as many as 18 rickshaws full of people going to the train station. One time, we were all lined up and the procession began. I directed the driver to go the shortest route. But Maharaji intervened and insisted that they go to the long route. Many devotees were gathered along that route, all of them hoping for one glimpse of darshan as he was leaving. These last darshan delayed Maharaji, and Siddhima and the mothers with whom he was to travel were all on the train. It was my pleasure in those days to attend to such matters as reservations, so I was busy sitting the mass and seeing on their needs. Maharaji was still outside of the station with the devotees when the engineer and the conductor signaled for the train to start. I thought, oh my God, what will happen? I myself will stay on the train with the mothers. I can't let them go alone. But for a full 4 minutes, the engineer struggled with the train but couldn't make it pass. Strolling slowly with his devotees, Maharaji came onto the platform. As he boarded the train, he shouted at me in English, "Get out!" As soon as Maharaj took his seat, the train began to pull away. One time, Maharaji asked me to make reservations for 2 first class, air conditioned places on the train leaving that very day. All the officials told me it was completely booked from Calcutta to Kalka, the east to west coast of India. Still, to be prepared, I bought 2 unreserved tickets. I was sure that I was wasting our time and we'd have to cash them in. Maharaji walked into the station, walked slowly along the platform and stopped, stalled at one spot. When the train pulled in, a first-class, air-conditioned car was stopped directly in front of Maharaji. I had watched how he chose that very spot to stand in, so I asked the conductor, who happened to be standing right there, for 2 berths in that car, and he said, "What? Are you crazy? This train is full from Calcutta to Kalka." At that moment, I lost my assurance and looked over to Maharaji. He merely raised one finger and said quietly, "Attendant." So I went over to the car attendant and asked again for 2 berths. And he said, yes, there is room for you. You see, a party who was reserved clear through had a get off at Mughal Sarai to attend to unexpected business. There are 2 berths vacant in this car. It was the car directly in front of Maharaji. One day, Maharaji and his driver were going from Bareilly to Kanchi. They arrived at Kanchi, and a little later others arrived and said, "You can't have come that way. The roads has been washed out for 4 days and there has been no traffic, not even trucks. The road continued to be impassable for 2 more days." Maharaji was going to Kashmir in a car when the clutch started to slip. We were in a small village with no repair facility, and the driver was afraid to go on because of the mountainous road. A supposed mechanic was found, but the more he tried, the worse the clutch got, until it wasn't working at all. I asked Maharaji what to do, and he said to stop a truck and have the truck tow the car. All the trucks, however, were going in the opposite direction. I reported this to Maharaji, who replied, "Oh, these Brahmins are so stingy. They won't put up enough money to hire a truck to pull the car." I had 1,000 rupees to put up, which was enough. Finally, I got a bus that would pull the car. I bought a rope, and we were just leaving when a bus came from the other direction, warning that there was a bus check stop ahead so that the bus shouldn't try towing the car. It was dark by now and there were no hotels, and I went to Maharaji and said, "How are the choices? We can sit in the car all night long like this with no blankets. We can get a truck to tow us back, or we can go on." This last choice implying that we would have to depend on Maharaji's power since the clutch was now gone. Maharaji said, "Let's go on." All the way to Srinagar there was no occasion to stop or use the clutch, and we never even needed gas. This of course was impossible by normal means. At a Mela, Maharaji kept telling people that the Ganges river was not really water but milk. One day Maharaji and several others were out on the river in a boat, and the devotees were eager to experience the truth of Maharaji's words. They said nothing, however. Maharaji told them to get a iota water pot of Ganga water and cover it, and he poured it into glasses for them. It was the sweetest milk. Since there were other devotees back at the camp, one of the people in the boat thought he'd take some back for them, but Maharaji grabbed the devotee's glass and threw it angrily into the Ganga. Maharaji once strengthened the faith of an Indian sadhu who also was called Ramdas by demonstrating his powers for him. Maharaji said, "Look here, Ramdas, I am disappearing. See." He took a small stone and stuck it against his body. Ramdas couldn't see Maharaji anymore. Then Maharaji said, "Now see, I am reappearing." And Ramdas could again see him there. Maharaji repeated this 3 or 4 times. Once a party of 50 or 60 Congress politicians were going to see Maharaji. He was staying at Hanumangarh. From there the road could be seen for a long way, so he knew they were coming. Maharaji suddenly got up and went down the hillside. Accompanied by an Indian sadhu, Ramdas, he walked to a small Devi temple. When the party arrived, they inquired about Maharaji's whereabouts. They were directed down the path. Maharaji and Ramdas had sat down in front of the temple. The congressmen also came to the small temple, and though they stood in open land about 60 feet away, they couldn't see him or Ramdas. The men were standing practically in front of them, saying to themselves, "Where is Neem Karoli Baba?" Maharaji had become invisible, and he had made Ramdas invisible. Now Ramdas was habituated to hashish and had the cough that naturally accompanies this. He had a spasm and wanted to cough. He couldn't stop it, but he feared that if he coughed, these people would hear and naturally guess that Maharaji was there. Maharaji said, "Don't mind, cough as much as you like." So Ramdas coughed loudly and got relief, but these men heard neither the talking nor Ramdas coughing. The congressmen gave up their search and went away, and only then did Maharaji reappear. During a journey, a horse started acting up, endangering its rider. Maharaji went up to the horse and spoke to it. "Look here, brother, let them get down now. Let them down. Do you understand?" The horse immediately became quiet. The devotees stopped down, and the journey was continued on foot. An army colonel approached the gate of the army camp and found Maharaji lying on the ground directly in front of the gate. When ordered to move, Maharaji replied that it was God's land and he was with the CID, Central Intelligence Department. The colonel became outraged and told the guards to move Maharaji and jail him in the army stockade. Some hours later, the colonel, after having been out, once again approached the gate. Again he found Maharaji lying before the gate, and the colonel started to yell at the guards for failing to carry out his orders, but they assured him that they had done as he had directed. A check of the stockade revealed that Maharaji was still there after the colonel became a devotee. Maharaji and some devotees spent the night in a dharmshala on the way to Badrinath. Maharaji sent the entire group out of his room and forbade them to enter during the night. They had seen a big cobra on Maharaji's bed. In the morning, Maharaji came out with the cobra and shooed it away. Sometimes later in Kanchi, Maharaji was told that a cobra was in the ashram. He made a hue and cry, "Cobra is here, cobra is here." A devotee remarked to him, "What is this? So much concern for a cobra now? What happened when you slept the whole night with a cobra? Now you are making such a commotion. You wicked person, go away," Maharaji replied. Maharaji was in Banaras with the police superintendent, a devotee. They were going over to a sadhu camp on an island in the middle of the Ganga, and the superintendent said, "We'll take a boat. In Banaras, the Ganga is over a mile across." Maharaji countered, "No, we'll go in the water." The superintendent couldn't swim and protested, "Maharaji, it's over our heads." Maharaji replied, "Just put your hand on my shoulder." So they waded into the river, and the next thing the superintendent knew, they were on the islands. They returned the same way. At our house, after the third or fourth day following Maharaji visit, my wife heard, "Keep some water for me in the night," coming from near the picture of Maharaji. One night she forgot, but later she awoke very thirsty and then remembered to put some water by the picture. In the morning, the glass which she had covered was nearly empty. There was a party going to Vasudhara near Badrinath, where the Ganga starts, but one ma was sick, so the group wouldn't take her. As the party left to go, the ma was bewailing her fate, and Maharaji came and said, "You want to see Vasudhara?" He touched her hand and said, "Now walk out on the porch." She did so, and what she saw was Vasudhara. She was in ecstasy. It turned out later that the party couldn't reach Vasudhara because of a roadblock. When they returned, she told them that she had been there, but of course they didn't believe her. She described it in detail, and an old guide who had been there before corroborated her description. Word reached Maharaji from the Pujari priest in Kanpur that the new Murti, not yet consecrated, had been broken. Maharaji and some of us immediately set out for Kanpur, driving all night. I felt that by this intensity Maharaji was teaching the discipline of sticking to something. There was to be no sleep until Ram's work was done. I tried to slow Maharaji down, however, by quoting the proverb, "Don't travel at night and don't be idle at noon." Maharaji said, "The same principle doesn't apply in every situation." When we arrived, we found that the Murti was no longer broken. Then Maharaji told a story of the saint Ramakrishnan, in which the Durga, an aspect of the Divine Mother, Murti had been broken, and Ramakrishna did puja to it and sang to it, and soon it was all fixed. A man was trying unsuccessfully to dig a well on his property and finally sent his son to Maharaji for help. Maharaji came to the farm, urinated and left, saying, Tell your father to try again." Indeed, a well was found which is still gushing today. At a certain Mela, a flood destroyed a bridge which kept collapsing every time they tried to rebuild it. The organizer of the Meta came to Maharaji for help, and Maharaji said he would bless the bridge. But the man insisted that Maharaji come to the site of the bridge itself. Maharaji stood there for a while, and the floodwaters began to recede. Soon the bridge was reconstructed and the matter turned out to be one of the most peaceful ever. People often gave Maharajji blankets. One time when he was through with the blanket, it suddenly became much smaller and he said, "Why are you giving me these blankets that are too small?" Maharajji and a devotee had settled in for a journey in the first class compartment of a train. The devotee felt it would be safer if Maharajji held the tickets until the conductor came, so he gave them to Maharajji. Maharajji looked at them and said, "What is this for?" and threw them out of the window of the moving train. The devotee was shocked but said nothing. As Maharajji continued his conversation, the devotee was worrying about the tickets and the conductor. Finally, the conductor knocked on the door and asked to see the tickets. The devotee hesitated a moment and then told Maharajji that the conductor wanted to see the tickets. Maharajji reached out towards the window and then handed the tickets to the devotee. He laughed and said, "Is this what you were worried about?" In 1958, I was acting as the leader of the landless people movement. I was arrested and charged with 4 counts: inciting a riot, trespassing, attempted murder, and obstructing a government servant from discharging his duties. I was assured by Maharajji not to worry, but it was turned out all right. But in 1964, I was convicted and sentenced to 2 4-year imprisonments. I immediately appealed the decision. I was not worried, but my relatives were quite upset and insisted I again go to Maharajji about the case. Maharajji assured me once more that all would turn out okay and added that when a particular judge whom he named was in office, then the decision would be reversed. The name given was not that of the present judge. The present judge was in fact soon transferred, but the replacement was also not the one Maharajji foretold. The case was being argued and was to be completed by the end of a particular day. I thought to myself, how could this be? It was a cold, drizzly day and the sun had set, and there were still several hours of arguing left, so the judge postponed the case until the next day. On that day, one very important paper was inexplicably missing without a trace, so that the case could not be finished. The judge ordered a further postponement until the paper could be reconstructed, and the reconstruction took 3 years. By that time now, 1968, the judge whom Maharajji had named had been put in that office. The case was dropped under his decision. I was visiting a saint in the south of India who was known for manifesting many things. As I was getting ready to leave, he said to me, "Do you want something, Ramdas?" "No, Babaji, I don't want anything." "Here," he said, and held out his hand, palm upward, and started to move it in a slow circular motion. I was still sitting at his feet, so that my eyes were close to his hand, and I watched like a hawk for the least tricky, carefully not to blink. But much to my amazement, there appeared to be a bluish light on his hand, which turned into a medallion. The whole business was confusing to me. Why did he do this? I later heard that Maharajji said of such miracles, "These are those siddhis, but they shouldn't be used much. They reduce spirit to magic." And he said to such saints, "Let them play." Some saints of the south are very much after miracles. Once in Vrindavan, before Guru Purnima day, a day honoring the Guru, Maharajji was feeding us by hand, one by one. He would feed us each a para. I tried to feed him one too. Of course, he didn't eat sugar, but I was insisting, with the thought that this was also prasad. "You must eat it, please eat it." So he pretended to eat it, but Naima caught him. You didn't eat it, Maharaj. He looked guilty, as if to say, Oh, you caught me. There it was in his hand. He'd palmed it. That precipitated wonderful play as he went into his whole magician act. Which hand is it in? Ha, you are wrong. It's in this hand. I don't think he was even using his powers for this game. He really was palming it, hiding it in his blanket, and using sleight of hand, all tricks that any magician can do. But he was saying, see, I'm like Sai Baba. I can make it appear, I can make it disappear, I can do anything. Magic, it's magic. We were in a car with Maharaji in Bombay. He was directing us to drive through small streets until finally we came to a house. Amma ran out and touched Maharaji's feet. It so happened that one of my colleagues had been urging me to ask Maharaji about the Satya Sai Baba miracles, and Maharaji had been ignoring the question. Now, sometime later in this house, Maharaji said, Mother, they think manifesting things is so great. Give us some murtis. And in her hand suddenly there were these little murtis of Krishna. Siddhima read 2 of them in her sari, and then she got home. She discovered 3 of them there. About the miracles, Baba, Maharaji would say, What is this? This is all foolishness. He could do miracles, but the greatest miracle that he could turn one's heart and mind toward God, as he did for me. I have no powers. I don't know anything. Maharaji was actually the biggest saint. He had done all the yogic austerities. There are saints in India, they aged ones, who almost never give darshan to people. Except for the few to whom they are kind, these saints cannot be seen. Sometimes they take the shape of a tiger or a monkey or a beggar. You can only have darshan if they want to give it to you, not otherwise. The true devotees of God never wear saffron, carry malas, prayer beads, or put on sandalwood. You can't know them unless they want it, and then you can only know them as much as they allow.